Good evening, counselors. Good evening to the public watching us. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is a meeting of the Brockton City Council for February 8th, 2021. Would you join me in a salute to our flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America,
to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. President,
Councilor Ianieri.
if I might, Mr. President, I'd just like to take a minute or two to take a moment of silence for a well-known educator in the city of Brockton that passed away just a few days ago, February the 4th, Mr. Donald Pike, a lifelong resident of the city of Brockton. And not only that, but attended Brockton Public Schools and went to Stonehill College and Boston College, and then became an educator here in the city of Brockton, and did all of his educating work right here as an outstanding teacher, and not only that, as an assistant principal and principal. Education was his biggest thing in life, and he was even a part of the people in the past, David Crosby and Jimmy Green, who started and put together the Brockton Community Schools program. So I want to take a moment and remember him. Great person. And for me, some 56 years ago, I was in his classroom. He was my 5th grade teacher, and we always enjoyed a good friendship relationship afterwards. And lifelong resident of Ward 3. Can't say enough about the gentleman. Loved the city, loved it well. And his son also works for us in the assessor's office, Christopher Pike. So just take a moment of silence and remember a great educator. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Ianieri.
May he rest in peace.
Council, I'd like to extend condolences to our colleague, Susan DeCastro, whose cousin died recently. Mr. Robert Dornan lived a few doors down from my daughter on Pondview Circle. And Councilor Ianieri, someone else you and I knew, he was a building custodian for many years. I'd like to acknowledge and condolences to the family of John Paziali, who was the custodian, I believe, at the high school for years and years. And he recently passed away. So we send our very best to the families. Mr. Clerk, item number 1.
We have the acceptance of the minutes of January 25th, 2021 City Council meeting.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the mayor notifying the City Council that Lucia Cersei of 118 Wilson Street, Brockton, has resigned from the Conservation Commission.
Accepted and filed.
We have the appointment of Joyce Lohi of 1366 Pleasant Street to the Conservation Commission for a 3-year term ending February 2024.
Referred to the Finance Committee.
We have the report of the Ordinance Committee for its meeting of January 28, 2021.
Accepted and filed.
The report of the Finance Committee for its meeting of February 1st, 2021.
Accepted and filed.
We have a hearing, petition of Z.E.&D Auto Repair, Inc., Jose Monterio, 16 Lily Avenue, Brockton, Mass., for a transfer of motor vehicle repair mechanical license located at 65 Court Street, Brockton. In City Clerk's office, November 20th, 2020. Hearing assigned for February 8th, 2021. All paperwork is on file, and the fire department has no objections.
Councilors, the duly published time for the hearing has arrived. Is Mr. Montero here? Mr. Montero? Anyone here representing ZE&D Auto Repair Incorporated? Councilors, any objection to holding this hearing until the end of the meeting to see if someone logged in? The chair hears none. Hearing will resume at the end of the meeting. Mr. Clerk, would you proceed with the next agenda item?
We have the communication from the Superintendent of Schools requesting permission to put out an RFP for a 5-year contract for school department warehouse and storage facility for the Brockton Public Schools. The school department is currently renting 2 warehouses spaces at 2 locations and is looking to consolidate the operation into 1 location that would better suit the needs of the school system.
Accepted and filed.
We have a communication from the mayor recommending the same.
Accepted and filed.
We have a communication from the CFO relative to the same.
Accepted and filed.
We have a communication from the Director of Planning and Economic Development requesting that the City Council authorize the acceptance of expenditures for the recoverable brownfield remediation grant, from the Mass Development in the amount of $250,000. The funds will be used to finalize our Phase 2 environmental site assessment and to remove underground storage tanks in contaminated soils. The grant is recoverable by Mass Development. This means that when the property is finally sold, the amount expended will be repaid to Mass Development from the sales proceeds.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the mayor recommending the same.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the CFO relative to the same.
Accepted and filed.
We have a communication from the Director of Planning and Economic Development requesting that the City Council authorize the acceptance and expenditures of the total grant award in the amount of $2,654,000 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Mass Works Program to the Planning and Economic Development Mass Works Program Grant Fund. The funds will be used to upgrade the sewer, drainage, and water utilities and rebuild the roadways.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the mayor recommending the same.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the CFO relative to the same.
Accepted and filed.
We have a communication from the Chief of Police requesting authorization to expend grant monies related to the fiscal 2021 Municipal Public Safety Staffing Grant Program from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security in the amount of $275,000.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the mayor recommending the same.
Accepted and filed.
Communication from the CFO relative to the same.
Accepted and filed.
We have an ordinance to provide noise control and establish and to enforce civil infractions for violations. Be ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton. A new ordinance be added to the revised ordinances, Chapter 14, offenses miscellaneous as Section 14-49 or the next section available. In Council, September 14, 2020. Ready referred to the Standing Committee on Ordinance. That report was favorable as amended. In City Council, November 23, 2020, the amendment was passed by a hand vote and passed to a third reading as amended.
Councilor Cruz, do you wish to speak in this item as Chair of Ordinance, or may we proceed to a vote?
I think we can proceed. I know Council Cardozo, I see, has her hand up, and I do think there was some question. I know we got some emails today, but I think what the best part of this ordinance is that it takes the subjective part out of this, and there's actually the police would have to have a decibel meter, and this wouldn't be anybody's opinion on sound. This would be a measurable, and the only way anybody could be fined is with a measurable piece of paper that shows that this decision is out of somebody's judgment and is scientific. So with that, I'll move on.
All right, Councilor Azak, your hand was up first according to the list.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to ask for a reverse roll call vote if there are no objections. So I don't know if you want to. That was my request.
All right. Councilors, when we hold the vote, any objection to a reverse roll call vote? The chair hears none. Councilor Cardozo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry, I'm using my phone right now because I'm having trouble with my computer audio. I tried to sign in a couple times and it wasn't working for me. So my issue with this ordinance, again, I feel like the folks in this community have been through a lot. With COVID, last year we increased their water bill. Some folks, their property taxes have gone up. We've had folks write to us on a number of occasions about different issues around equity. And now this just feels like another thing that we're hitting them with. And I just question the timing of this. I just don't think it's a good time to be talking about fines on anyone, especially in the Black and brown communities. And we did receive some emails today from some folks that articulated their position on why this isn't a good ordinance for our community. It's not culturally sensitive. And I think that all of the councils should look at those emails. They made a great argument against this. So I would ask my councilors to vote no on this tonight, and I will be voting no on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too will be voting no on this particular noise ordinance because not for the same reasons that Councilor Cardozo actually has stated, but for the fact that I think it fails miserably to deal with the issues that we have at hand. I actually have brought this whole issue up when we had the ordinance committee meeting in terms of the decibel that is being proposed in this particular ordinance. 60 decibel to me makes absolutely no sense in a city. It might work well on paper, and I mean paper only, in these other cities that we're trying to copy their ordinances from. I know for a fact that it does not work on those communities, nor is it enforced at 50 or 60 decibel. This is basically we're living in this euphoria that doesn't quite exist. And when you look at conversation levels of human beings within 40 or 50 feet, reach the levels of 65 decibel. So therefore, we're looking to punish a community that we know for a fact that the vast majority, and we can start taking bets, that the vast majority of those individuals who will be hurt by this ordinance will be people that look like me and sound like me. Therefore, I voiced this out before, and I'm going to continue to voice this out. I'm not going to be supporting this ordinance because to me, it fails to take the community and the diversity of our city into account. And for that reason, I will not be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, I was kicked off for a little while, just got back in. But Mr. President, tonight I am rising to support, to voice my support for this noise ordinance before the council. The residents of Brockton, after a very short summer, are expecting from this council to enact a clear and enforceable noise ordinance. And I believe the ordinance before you does just that. Now, I believe this ordinance has already been summarized, but I could do it quickly. There is a time restriction, which prohibits unreasonable and excessive noise. And that's between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., Sunday through Thursday, and between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. A measurement device is required. The Brockton Police Department shall use a properly calibrated sound meter, and no prohibited noise shall exceed 60 decibels during the restricted hours. Also, the sound measurement shall be made at a distance of 50 feet from the property line of the sound source. This ordinance is applicable to all residential and commercial zones. This ordinance makes proper exemptions for emergency vehicles, officially sanctioned parades, sporting events, and public events. Also for necessary permitted or emergency street and highway repair when the public safety requires it be done at night. There is a warning for a first offense. With that warning, the police shall issue a writing evidencing the date, the time, and the decibel level. Also within 7 days, the Brockton Police Department would be required to send that warning to the homeowner of the offending property. Any subsequent violation of this ordinance carries within a 12-month period will be deemed a civil infraction and carry a $300 penalty. Now, I believe this ordinance is clear on what noise are restricted and when that noise is restricted. It also lays out a clear and objective standard for enforcement. Now, it's my hope that this noise ordinance will provide some relief to the residents of Brockton in the matter of loud late night parties. And additionally, it is also my intention to file a resolve in the fall to discuss this matter with both the administration and the police department to discuss the enforcement and its impact on our residents and make any adjustments if necessary. I believe this is a fair and equally enforced ordinance. And I hope for your vote on this matter tonight. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone. I represent Ward 4 on the south side of the city. And I don't have a sense of how many calls the other ward councilors get about noise, but I know that pretty much everyone gets some. I get a lot. I've had to leave the movies and restaurants because I was getting calls on Saturday nights about noise that I wasn't able to help anyone, while being out having an enjoyable evening with my family. I've had residents who have been threatened. I've had residents whose personal property has been harmed, tires slashed and such, for knocking on the door and saying, could you please turn that down? I've had all kinds of problems throughout Ward 4 that I am aware of. And I sincerely do not see this as something that discriminates. I see this as something that levels the playing field. I have residents who are afraid to do anything about this or to knock on a door, and they call me instead. I support this ordinance. I think this will be an objective standard that will be evenly applied. I've spoken with several police officers about it, including Chief Gomes, and he supports it and is willing to work with me. I've spoken with the grant writer for the city about writing a grant to get some decibel meters so that this is all done right and fairly applied. And so therefore, for all these reasons, on behalf of Ward 4, I do support this ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would say, we've talked about this a lot. The biggest thing for me is that, going door to door, and I really put a priority on that. Going door to door, talking to people, when I'm going around, a lot of people request something to be done about the noise, to strengthen or to change what we have now. And this is the first real meaningful attempt at adjusting our ordinances, as in my recent memory. I don't think that, and everybody brings it up. This is not a race specific issue. Nobody wants, the out of control parties and the things that we're dealing with. We're not aiming at, weaponizing neighborhood complaints, and we would, this won't do that. This is just about, making sure that we address the problems our constituents are having. I don't think that I could seriously go door to door and look these people in the eye if I said, we had one and we brought it all the way to the end, and then we just, put the brakes on it and turned around. I think that the plan we have in place, the passage of this ordinance, and then a check in the fall to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. I think that's the best way to move forward. And, I I see there are other hands. I was going to call the vote just to, bring this right to a decision, but I will hold off because I know other counselors are raising their hands, but both in terms of the strength of the ordinance and the other issues surrounding it, I don't think that, I don't think that there's anything to kill this over. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Monahan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Again, this is nothing to do with the different communities. It's something to do with the issues that we have in the city. Last year was a fireworks haven in the city. More phone calls, more noise than you can imagine. As we all know, we all got the calls. I had to deal with a lot of things in the fairground along with Council Cruz and Council Nayanieri. If there was the councils that are against this, that they'd like to offer some amendments to it, maybe higher decibel or higher or a farther distance, before that there would be any fines involved or a warning, that'd be, I'd be willing to hear that, but we definitely need something because it's getting out of control. And like I said, last summer was a horror show, and I've gotten plenty of calls. I've actually gone myself out to one of the calls and couldn't believe it. So we need something. If we have to tweak this more, we should do it. Or if anybody wants to offer something, they should, but we do definitely need something. And, I put it out there. If anybody wants to amend this or change it at all to make it more palatable, then I'd say offer it up, but we definitely need something. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Ianieri.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to follow suit with some of the other councils that have spoken in favor of this, and I am definitely in favor of it. I was when I was on the ordinance committee and having served there the last 3 years in a row. We had talked about something that needed to be come in place in regards to this matter, which I think is very much capable of being done. And for all of the people of the city of Brockton, and I say it, all of the people in the city of Brockton, we're not pointing fingers at certain individuals, but everyone, because I've had difficulties in Ward 3, having a few summers ago. I had issues on Longwood Avenue where I had 3 tenement homes and totally out of control. Totally out of control. I don't care if it was even an Irish family, totally out of control. And we have to find a way to control this. This is the way. I don't want to hear us say, let's bring up something, we'll hold. No, let's not hold it. I think Council Thompson's done a great job here in putting this together. Let's get it done. Let's do it in the best interest of the city, as I say, and let's go to work with it. I hope in the future we start to see something that controls traffic so we can control speed, how people drive, and stop hitting homes like we just had an accident at Ash Street and Belmont Street just Friday evening. Totally, I mean, unbelievable what we're going through. Let's stick to it here, and let's get this done. Let's take the vote and let's move forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Azak, I think everyone else has spoken. You had your hand up again.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I would just like to speak on this as I know that Councilor Thompson's worked hard on this. I want to remind everybody, we already have a noise ordinance in the books. This just gives us a tool to be able to measure the noise and help enforce the enforce the ordinance. So I commend Councilor Thompson. This is something that we're dealing with throughout the city. As you've heard from other ward councilors, we're dealing with in Ward 7. It's throughout the city, and it's not really made to punish, but kind of to get people to realize, the quality of life issues that we're dealing with, and how, to respect our neighbors' quality of life issues. So I will support this, and one of the reasons that I am supporting it is that Councilor Thompson also just stated that in the fall, we will take a look at this and review it. And if we find that decimal level needs to be changed, then that will happen. So I think, I would look forward to having the other councilors' input on that. So this is that's a good start, and I think it's it's long overdue. It's long overdue, and I will support this. So with that being said, I would we'll call the vote. So motion to we'll make a motion to call the vote.
All right, the vote has been called. Would the clerk please call the roll in reverse order?
Thompson,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
No.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Cardozo,
No.
Azak.
Yes.
That's 9 in the affirmative, 2 in opposition.
The order is ordained. The ordinance is ordained.
Motion for reconsideration?
Second.
There's been a motion properly made and seconded for reconsideration. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
No.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
No.
Ianieri,
No.
Farwell.
No.
Lally,
No.
Mendez,
No.
Monahan,
No.
Nicastro,
No.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
No.
That's 2 in the affirmative, 9 in opposition to the motion.
Reconsideration fails. Thank you, councilors. Mr. Clerk? Mr. Clerk, item number 20. Did we lose the clerk?
They're muted.
He's muted.
I'm there now. Number 20. An ordinance amending Part 2 of the revised ordinances, Chapter 21, taxi cabs, buses, etc., be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton, Section 21-11A shall be amended. In council, November 9th, 2020, read and referred to Standing Committee on Ordinance. That report was favorable as amended.
Would the clerk please read the amendment for the record?
I'll be right with you.
Thank you.
In council, November 9th, 2020, therefore the below proposed ordinance amending Part 2 of the revised ordinances, Chapter 21, taxi cabs, buses, etc., is hereby proposed. An ordinance amending Part 2 of the revised ordinances, Chapter 21, taxi cabs, buses, and so forth, be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton, Section 21-11A, shall be amended by inserting or reflecting roof signs so that the ordinance reads as follows. All taxi cabs in the city shall display an identity light or reflective roof sign on top of the taxi cab. Susan DeCastro, Ward 4 Councilor.
Mr. President, I believe there's a scrivener's error in that.
Yeah.
Attorney Resnick, that should say display, not displace, correct? Shall display.
Correct. We can correct that. Yep.
Yes, just so people realize that.
So-
Should say they should display that, not displace it.
All right. Is that, councilors, is that clear? The word should be display and not displace.
Yeah, okay. All right,
So-
so noted.
All right, now the question is on the amendment. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
The amendment is adopted. Now we proceed to a vote on passage to a third reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
Passed to a third reading. Item number 21.
An ordinance be ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows. That the City Council adopt the following amendment to the ordinance establishing licensing and regulations for adult use marijuana establishments. Section 1.0041H is amended by inserting the following sentence into end of section 1.0041H. This section, limiting the number of recreational retail marijuana licenses, shall not apply to an RMD that was provisionally licensed not later than July 1, 2017. Be it further ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows, that the language intentionally omitted in section 1.005 be stricken and the following language be inserted in its place, so that the following language replaces section 1.005 in its entirety. Upon such time as the City Council has granted all available recreational retail marijuana licenses pursuant to subsection 1.001H, the clerk of the City Council shall no longer accept any new applications for a recreational retail marijuana license. Notice shall be given in writing to any applicant with a pending application, notifying the applicant that there are no available recreational retail marijuana licenses. If any recreational retail marijuana licenses become available in the City of Brockton, the city clerk shall post notice of the same on the city website by posting notice of the same in City Hall. In City Council, January 11, 2021, reading for the Standing Committee on Ordinance, that was report was favorable as amended.
The chair has a question for Councilor Cruz, Chair of Ordinance, if you will. I thought there was language regarding the number of licenses. Have I missed something here?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Could you repeat that?
I thought there was language regarding the number of licenses and a change in that, and I did not hear that. Have I missed something?
Yes, the clerk read that. The first paragraph is the number of recreational marijuana licenses shall not exceed 14 in number. The limitation on the number of recreational retail marijuana licenses specifically shall apply to an RMD that was provisionally licensed not later than July 1st, 2017. So what this has done, the feeling of the committee was, the ordinance subcommittee was that we have 14 host agreements. There was never any provision made for how those were going to be taken in order. The feeling was that we need to reach that number at this point, and that once everything is given out, the other question that has continually come up is we've taken more than actually at this point. We've taken more applications than we had original licenses for. So we'd be put in the position of denying licenses because we didn't have them, and we didn't think that was fair to future applicants. So any debate or questions is up to everybody else.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes.
The amendment will indicate the number of licenses that you are looking for. If you'd like, I will read that amendment in its entirety, if that will help the council in any way.
Please do.
I think it should be read as part of the record. That's why I did not see it on my list here, and I apologize for taking up the time. But for the
No, I'm
record.
sorry, we do have to vote on it that way. My apologies.
That's right.
All right, then if you'd like, I will give you the amendment as received by this office. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows, that the City Council adopts the following amendment to the ordinance establishing licensing and regulations for adult use marijuana establishments. Section 1.0041H is amended by inserting the following sentence to the end of section 1.0041H. The number of recreational retail marijuana licenses shall not exceed 14 in number. The limitation on the number of recreational retail marijuana licenses specifically shall apply to an RMD that was provisionally licensed not later than July 1, 2017. Be it further ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows, that the language intentionally omitted in section 1.005 be stricken and the following language be inserted in its place, so that the following language replaces section 1.005 in its entirety. Upon such time as the City Council has granted all available recreational retail marijuana licenses pursuant to subsection 1.0041H, the clerk of the City Council shall no longer accept any new applications for a recreational retail marijuana license. Notice shall be given in writing to any applicant with pending application, notifying the applicant that there are no available recreational retail marijuana licenses. If any recreational retail marijuana licenses become available in the City of Brockton, the city clerk shall post notice of the same on the city website and by posting notice of the same in City Hall. That was by Councilor Cruz and sponsored by Councilor Rodriguez. And that is the complete amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councilors, I thought it was important to read that into the record. We will be voting first on the amendment. Does anyone seek recognition to speak on the amendment?
Mr. President, if I might.
Yes, Councilor Ianieri.
At this particular time, I'm not going to be voting in favor of this because I'm having a hard time digesting whether or not the City of Brockton actually needs 14 licenses, to be truthful with you. I'm just finding it a little bit difficult to swallow it in regards to the situations that I know we've been going through in the past few meetings, hearings we've had in regards to this issue of how many licenses do we have, what don't we have, how come we do have, what don't we do, and this and that. I'm still just, I just don't know if Brockton needs 14 licenses. So with that being said, I mean, I'm just not supporting it to go on to the next level. I might have a change of heart maybe when it's I'm done in the 22nd. I've been trying to just do some of my own research in regard to this particular item, which took us, I don't know how many years even to get to this particular level since it was passed in 2016. Here we are 2021 and we still don't know what hell direction we're going anyways. But we have one that's really done its job in its entirety, and that's the one that's on West Chestnut Street. So, that being said, I just have some other things I want to look at, and I just having a hard time with 14 licenses, and I sometimes think that maybe we should be looking at other things and more manufacturing and cultivation, which adds jobs to the city, because selling recreational marijuana is not going to add jobs to the city. But anyhow, I don't want to expand on that. I just, at this point in time, I'm going to be voting no, and see how my heart turns and feels on the 22nd to move forward with it. But that's my own opinion, and being an old Brocktonian, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people asking, why do we need 14 licenses in the city? So we'll let it take its step, and it's going to hurt, I think, the 8 people that are trying to do something. And I don't even think some of them will succeed, to be truthful with you, but that's how I feel. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Councilor. Councilor Azak?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I don't object to adding licenses, but I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. I was at the ordinance meeting last week and I raised a few concerns to the committee that I don't see in this, that haven't been covered in this amendment. The reason for this amendment, as Councilor Cruz stated, is due to the fact that we have more applicants than with community host agreements than we have available licenses. That is why we talked about increasing these licenses. But this amendment would almost double the number of original licenses that we had asked originally. I asked for I asked our attorney if we could get legal verbiage to put into this amendment that would guarantee that the licenses, that if we were to increase this number, that these licenses would be available to the applicants that are already holding host community agreements, so that this does not open it up to new applicants. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in the same situation that we're in. So I would ask that there would be some sort of wording in this to support that. Otherwise, you know, I don't know, Attorney Resnick, I did ask that question during ordinance, but I don't believe that anything in here does state that it is that if we do increase these numbers, that these licenses would go to the existing applicants that hold host community agreements. And I also, I mean, how do we know that the mayor isn't going to sign more host community agreements? And then, you know, how can we word that in here so the city council does not find itself in the same situation in the future that we're in, that we've been dealing with in the last few months? So that's a question to Attorney Resnick. I don't know if it isn't, if anything was put into this, but I didn't find it. I read through what was sent to us and I couldn't find anything.
No. So the only thing that the ordinance committee can have before you is what the ordinance committee approves. So that language was not something that the ordinance committee made a motion to amend on. So that's why it's not reflected in what you see. The issue with that is that your marijuana license application ordinance is intended to be lifelong. So assuming that the 14 applicants or as many applicants as you actively have, let's say one doesn't come into fruition and then another one comes available, you would have language in there that says that, you know, they can't have a license, assuming that you give it to these 14. So that's why I wouldn't recommend language like that. They do require a host community agreement even to get approval from the CCC, and it's part of the requirements for the application. So the only way in which you would have someone else in front of you would be as if the mayor was to issue a new host community agreement.
Did that answer
So-
your question?
Well, so there isn't anything that says that the mayor can't sign anymore. I mean, whether it's
correct.
Mayor Sullivan or any other mayor, I mean, there isn't anything that states that a mayor cannot keep adding to these host community agreements, correct?
Correct, nor should there be, because then you're taking away an executive function that the Cannabis Control Commission has designated within his capacity as the contracting authority for the city. So that's why your ordinance can't take that away from him. I guess that's just the trust you have in your mayor to your current mayor, perhaps future mayors, to not extend the host community agreements.
And who's keeping track of the host community? Because it was just stated in, I believe, the amendment, it said that it would be given to applicants with host community agreements, but who's keeping track of that? Whose job is that to keep track of that these, if we were to approve more licenses, what order they would be given to and who they would be given to? Whose job is that?
The host community agreements, 13 have signed extensions of the original agreements that were for 1 year. The new agreements are all for 3 years. I believe Solicitor Bridges said during the ordinance committee meeting that she had sent the draft to the 14th applicant maybe sometime end of November, December time period, and just hadn't gotten any response back. So that's where those 14 stand.
Okay, so then does that leave that if this was to pass, does that leave that one, say we were to vote on 14, so does that leave an open license, or does that just,
There are 14 host community agreements,
okay.
and there'd be 14 licenses available if this amendment carried.
So if that applicant doesn't respond, it doesn't move forward, does that make that a free a free license, like an open license? The one that you just mentioned about Attorney Bridges?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Assuming the mayor made a decision to give someone a host community agreement. Correct.
So from what you're stating, there's nothing we can do to keep it just to the ones that already have it and not add to ones coming in, correct? So I'm understanding you correctly?
Yeah, I would advise against it.
Okay.
But that's something that you can consider when you're granting, whether you're choosing to grant or deny a license. You know, if they come before you and you want to give priority to the 14 who currently have them, you can state that in your vote. That can be a ground.
Okay. And I mean, these concerns were brought to me by, in my ward, there's already 2 applicants that are that already had host community agreements, and they're the ones that kind of brought these questions to me. So that's why I'm bringing them to the full council. So at this time, it just, as much as I want to increase the numbers, but I also don't want to dilute this business. I don't want it just to start all over again. I don't want I think we should be able to control the numbers so they're not, I think we owe those businesses as well, the ones that already have host community agreements. So I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this, because I do feel we need to somehow keep it under control. And 14 just seems a big number. So thank you, Attorney Resnick. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome.
Mr. President, I have my hand up, sorry.
Yes, I have quite a few people. Councilor Mendez is next.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. I do agree that we need to increase the number of licenses because we were put in a very impossible situation where we had more applicants out there than licenses available to give. The question that I have is based on the amendments that we have before us. Does anything touches the zoning aspect? Are we still bound by the 75% of the zoning, the downtown area, or is that no longer applicable? Because I didn't really see anything in here, so I wasn't sure if that still stands or we just not going forward with that anymore.
The zoning still applies. The reason why you don't see anything like that in front of you is because the city of Brockton has 2 separate ordinances, one for licensing and one for zoning. So what's before the council is a change to the licensing only. And that's because you would have to make a separate amendment if there was one interested in it to the zoning ordinance, which it's a separate process, requires comment from planning, a public hearing, and it's just a longer process. So the zoning ordinance has not changed.
Okay, perfect. That was my question. Thank you.
Councilor Cardozo.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I have a procedural question first, and then I'll go into my other comments. So with the clerk reading item number 21, it did not include, the language that came out of the ordinance meeting, and then he read that language. Does that satisfy, was this a discrepancy? Does that satisfy this item, number 21?
So what was originally read was the ordinance as submitted. That's how it's going to appear on the agendas. The vote is on the amendment, which he read as well. So if the amendment is approved, your next agenda would reflect the as amended for final passage. But until that vote is taken, the vote is technically as on the agenda on the original proposal.
So
and what happened here?
So the amendment does not have to be included in the agenda?
No, it does. That's why you see on your agenda as amended.
Okay, but not the language.
Correct.
All right, just for clarification for the public. Thank you, Attorney Resnick. Okay, so.
Councilor, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor, go ahead.
Okay, so now my next thing is, God, I don't even know where to start. On November 5th, we introduced some amendments to the ordinance committee that addressed equity in this industry. And it was the beginning of a conversation. We had a citizens ordinance drafted by Mr. Jamal Brathwaite and Mr. Ian Woods. And we talked about some different amendments that we wanted to this ordinance. So then we were to come back to the ordinance committee and introduce those amendments. We still plan on doing that, but then since then we had all of these other discussions on this council around this issue. So we just haven't had time to introduce those amendments. But what I would like to see added to this amendment is exactly what we're talking about. If some of these licenses don't come to fruition, right? Can we add a line here that states that we will reserve 4 of these licenses for equity applicants, SE applicants? That way, if one of these licenses, should something happen and it doesn't come to fruition, not only are we holding on to, we don't want to add language like Attorney Resnick says that we're just going to give licenses to these 14 that have hosts. I think the more important conversation should be, how do we undo some of the wrongdoing that has occurred in this process, and we guarantee equity in this process? Can we add language stating that at least 4 of these licenses will be reserved for social equity applicants? My question to Shannon, to Attorney Resnick.
Yes, your ordinances can provide for priority, but not for guarantee, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the language would be that we would prioritize at least 4 of these licenses, or can we say reserve 4 of these licenses for social equity applicants?
The language that the CCC has used in like their recent publications has been priority. You could say something along the lines of the council shall give priority review to SE applicants.
Okay, I think that would help us to show that we care about equity in this industry. It would help us to kind of undo some of the wrongdoings. That's the only word I can find for it. And when I say wrongdoings, I'm not blaming anyone. There was a lot of misinformation and a lot of things that we needed to educate ourselves on. I just think that it would be good to add this language to this amendment so that we guarantee that we're looking at equity moving forward if one of these licenses doesn't come to fruition. And then we will include those amendments, like I said, that we discussed during that ordinance meeting on November 5th. We'll submit those to the ordinance committee for consideration. So is that something we can do this evening? We can motion to add that language, or no?
You can make a motion on the floor to, you can do it 2 ways. You can ask for it to be included in what's before the council, or you can do it, let's say the amendment passes, you can make another amendment. You could do that, but I just want to make clear. So there's a difference between the CCC's designation for SE applicants and EE applicants, so social economic applicants as opposed to economic empowerment applicants, just so that the council is aware that those are separate designations.
Thank you. So would that be some
inquiry?
Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Just an inquiry on that. Attorney Resnick, I'm sorry, Council Fowler, this is a parliamentary inquiry. Can you explain the difference between priority and, if we put that in, and what's the other phrase? The guarantee.
Reserve.
Reserve. Can you explain the difference if it's in there?
Priority would mean that if they have an applicant that's ready to be reviewed, you reviewed it first. So like, let's say this is why, like, I get the point. But practically speaking, if you have 14 licenses to give, the only difference in doing that would just, let's say you have 4 applicants that have SE designations, they'd be voted on as applications number 9, 10, 11, 12. It doesn't change the amount of licenses available.
But it would you say that it would, so if one of these applications doesn't like come to fruition, it would prioritize the next SE applicant over someone that was non-SE?
Yes, but I think that you could do that with this, without changing what's before the council tonight. So I think you could put language in that says any future applicants that have a SE designation with the CCC shall be given priority review. So like in those instances, what is also in front of the council is language that the clerk's office will provide notice in the event that any such applications or licenses become available. That might be where your interest lies, in that if a license comes available, then you give priority to an SE applicant.
Counselor, could the chair suggest that we focus on this First Amendment? Further discussion obviously would be appropriate. Vote on this, and then if there are subsequent amendments, obviously that would require a motion and a second and discussion. But I think it's important to focus on this amendment that has been read by the clerk thus far and find out where we're going with that before we start embracing perhaps other changes in the ordinance. Does that sound acceptable to the council?
Yes.
Does anyone wish to speak on the current amendment? If Councilor Cardozo, if you've concluded on this particular amendment that changes the number, I can go on to another councilor. If not, you still have the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. You can move on to another council.
All right, then I'll go to Councilor Nicastro, followed by
Thank you.
Councilor Lally.
Thank you. Very briefly, I'm concerned about the number. We're going up almost double, from 8 to 14. I would prefer to see us go to 11 or 12. I just feel that this is too many. This is an untested industry in our community. I do have concern about the businesses that we've already given these licenses to. We don't know what their impacts are going to be on the community, and so we really don't have a gauge for that, let alone for adding more. I would prefer that we reduce this number to 12.
All right, have you concluded, Councilor?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just a little disappointed, top to bottom, in this entire process. You know, this was started by a vote of the people of Brockton in 2016. In my personal opinion, it took the ordinance committee longer than I'd have liked to see to assemble the general ordinances. They did a very good job in what they wound up producing, but we were slower than the average city when it came to that. We were slower than the average city when it came to getting these applicants in front of the council. And now we're still going. My constituents in 2016, 2017 were opposed. They weren't really jazzed about 8, and I can't foresee them being big fans of 14. We made the law as the council, and I know the council also has the ability to change the law, but we made the law. The council sets the boundaries in which the executive, the mayor, operates. The mayor chose to expand the number of host community agreements. The council did not. The council set an exact limit on the number of licenses that we felt would be fine for the city of Brockton. And then afterwards, the number of host community agreements were adjusted. That just means we have to pick from those host community agreements. Does not mean that anybody did anything bad. It just means that now some people who have host community agreements are not going to get a license. I am not in favor of expanding the number of licenses. I think 8 is more than enough for the city of Brockton as it is. And I'm not happy with the fact that this is going to continue on and on. I'd like to wrap it up, and I think the general public would like it resolved as well, to be perfectly honest. I know it's weird for the 24-year-old to be the first one fed up with all the weed business. But it's going on indefinitely. But no, I'm not in favor of any more licenses, and I'd like this resolved. This should not be a long-term issue. This should have been done when the rest of the cities were done. We cannot be economically competitive if it takes us 5 years to land a plane that it takes somebody else 8 to 12 months to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And with all due respect to Council Lally, we're not pilots of any planes, and our job is to basically try to balance things here in the city of Brockton. And we were given a flawed system to begin with, and I think we owe it now to the taxpayers to kind of fix this. As to whether or not 14 licenses is too much, 10 licenses is too much, whether or not they're going to be successful or not, that's not really the function of the council. The council's job is to make sure that the laws that we pass are fair across the board. When this body looks at the fact that we had 10 licenses given, 10 host agreements given out by the previous administration, and there was not a single minority from the city of Brockton included in that group, this is where the R word came out, and people brought in the fact that, racism was used or not used. But when you've got 10 applicants and not a single one is an applicant of color in the city, when I became mayor, I tried to balance the system by at least including 4 applicants of color into that mix. So now your folks are perfectly fine with basically kicking those minorities to the curb so that we can keep some of the so-called previous applicants on board because we're so concerned with their business, when in fact, you've got smaller communities in Massachusetts that have a lot more than 14 licenses, marijuana licenses. You can look at the western part of the state. There's plenty of communities out there that have a lot more than 14. As a matter of fact, we have 40-something liquor establishments in the community. And I don't hear people saying that, well, this restaurant or this bar isn't surviving versus that one. That's not really our job. Our job is to pass ordinances that are equitable, balanced, so that there's not a perception of discrimination that's brought into the mix, which that ordinance and the way we're doing this business in terms of the licensing of marijuana licenses basically cries out discrimination. Because how do you explain in the only majority city in Massachusetts,
computer,
and when you look at, you don't have a single minority operator from Brockton operating a licensed establishment in the city, and people are saying, well, we want to make sure that it stays within that cocoon, that small group of people that we always try to protect, and that's what I have a major issue with. It's not up to us. We put the licenses out. Mayor Carpenter put out 10 licenses, when in fact, when we only had technically 8 licenses. Well, there was no issues with that one. Now, all of a sudden I come in and I expanded it to include some minorities in the mix. And now what are you gonna tell me? That we're basically gonna look at and say, well, we'll get all the white applicants in the loop and we'll keep the non-white off the loop? Is that how we're planning to operate on this? And then we worry about, people coming in and complaining about the fact that the playing field isn't level, and that the fact that we're not looking at the city, in basically how things are supposed to be done. I still go back to what we just voted on in terms of the noise ordinances. Somebody like myself, I'm not against the noise ordinance. I just want to make sure that it goes down equitably, balanced, so that everybody is treated exactly the same way. And this applies as well to this licensing process that we have in place. It was a flawed way of doing business, and it continues to be a flawed way when some of us are trying to remedy who gets a license, who doesn't get the license. But you know what? Whether or not they succeeded in business, that's not really up to us. We basically make the licenses available and let the competition begin. Let those who are able to compete and fight for their field, in the sense, deal with what they need to deal with. It should not be up to us, and it should not be, what are we going to do? Go down and basically take away a license because some of us feel uncomfortable with 8, 11, 12, 13. There were four community host agreements given out by me when I was mayor. There was 10 given out by Carpenter when he was mayor. Therefore, we have 14 host agreements. These are 14 individuals that were told that you have some expectation of getting a license. And that's where the 14 number came from. And I hope that we're gonna take some of this BS aside and face the fact that this city, the way we've done things in this city, has never been balanced, has never been equitable. People of color has never been treated in this community as they should. You look at the funding that comes into this community, it's not balanced. It's up to us. I know there's only a handful of us in this council that basically speaks for that community, but it's a shame that not more people would speak up and say, look, we need to balance things out in this community because it's been out of balance, out of whack for the longest time, and it's time that we fix some of this stuff. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilors, just a factoid from the chair. Of the 6 licenses that have been given out by this council, I believe you'll find 3 out of the 6 went to minorities. One went to a young lady who was a minority and opened up on Pleasant Street. The other went to a gentleman, I believe he's Middle Eastern. And the third went to a minority businesswoman of Asian Indian descent. I have a question for our legal counsel, just for the public and for the rest of us. Attorney Resnick, does the receipt of a host community agreement carry some guarantee that you are entitled to a license by the licensing authority?
That exact issue is actually being challenged in Taunton right now. The courts haven't weighed in on that. But no, the CCC did make it clear that there's 2 separate processes which municipalities are allowed to do: licensing process, host community process. So in my opinion, no, a host community agreement does not entitle any applicant to a license, but that issue is being challenged right now in court.
All right, and just Councilor Rodriguez, on a personal note, and I admire your passion and your vigor in representing constituents, but for my part, please don't say that I don't care about minority people and that only a couple of council members do. I respect all of you. I think everyone on the council comes to these meetings, I hope, with an open mind and with the goal of trying to do the best we can to improve the quality of life for the entire community. And I certainly respect your right to say what you said, but at least for this counselor, I do care about people. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what gender.
Mr. President, I want to make sure I see it in actions, not just in words.
Well,
I want to see it in actions, not just in words.
Yeah, well, I don't need a cheap retort like that. I believe my public career shows what I've been able to do.
That is your opinion. You're allowed to have one, so let's please move on.
You are too, Counselor. Let me go on to the next counselor who has not spoken yet. And I believe that is going to be Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the efforts of everybody, of all members of this council who have worked on this ordinance previously in the former ordinance committee that put this ordinance together, the current ordinance committee who's still working on it. But this process, I wouldn't say has been a smooth process. It seems like the goalposts have been changed throughout the process. And now we find ourselves in a situation where an ordinance was written and then more host agreements were given out. And now it becomes an issue of fairness for everyone. So I do agree this is a matter of fairness. If an issue wasn't taken care of with the original 10, and it's now addressed in this all residents and give everybody a chance to take part in this business. Well, we had an ordinance that was written for 10. Now we have 14. It's one of two things: either change the ordinance to address the situation as it now currently stands, or face litigation. And so I think it's only fair to everybody who currently holds a host community agreement to give them a fair chance to receive their license. And after tens of thousands of dollars of expenditure up to this point. So I believe the only fair way to move forward is to give everybody who has a current host agreement a chance to obtain their license. I originally would not want to see 14, but the market will decide who has the best shop. And I think we should let the market decide, work that issue out. When it comes to, I did have one question when it comes to Councilor Azak's question about basically the cap, right? What prevents us from getting back into the same exact situation if another future mayor starts granting HCAs? And it's from my understanding that this current ordinance states that after the 14 are given out, that's it. We close up shop. Nobody can move further with the process. Nobody goes in before any of the city boards, and nobody comes before the city council. So I believe if Attorney Resnick, maybe if you could clarify that issue. But once these 14 licenses are given out, that's it. There will be no more hearings held, even if additional HCAs are issued.
That aspect, your last part is correct. As soon as the 14 are granted, there will be no additional hearings held. That goes into the whole clerk's information about posting that none are available. And then when they do become available, that's the process they will use. However, those 14, assume that all 14 start business and open their doors and keep their businesses open. There are language in the host community agreement and in your own licenses that designates areas in which a license may be revoked, suspended, forfeited, those types of situations. So that's when you would see another hearing, is if one of those 14 lost their license, didn't have the funds to go forward, so they forfeited their license. In that event, you would have another hearing. The reason why my concern was from Councilor Azak's question was because the CCC and some of their guidance, the language that we had before was straight from the regulations as to what you could do. The CCC is very clear that you can limit your licenses, but you have to follow specific guidelines for limiting it, which would include percentages based off of your liquor licenses or by designating a specific number. So let's say you did 14, but in the event it's not to these 14 people, then we're going to make it 8. That, in my opinion, doesn't follow the CCC's parameter for designating the amount of available licenses.
So, Attorney Resnick, so if a license holder doesn't open up shop within the requisite period of time, or their license is revoked due to some infraction, that license then comes back to available, and then now the mayor would decide who he's going to extend a host agreement to then be eligible to acquire that license, correct?
Correct. In order to have a license from the CCC, you're going to have a host community agreement. So yes, it has to be in tandem. There will be some input from the mayor on any additional applications.
Okay. So, all right. Well, I appreciate that response. And Mr. President, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilor. I think we're starting around again, Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually my first time speaking on it because I just introduced the amendment was all, but I think there's a few things we need to think about here. Number one is people shouldn't get hung up on the number 8. That was a number that was not arrived at by the council, the previous city council deciding that was the best number. at the time, the CCC had mandated that 20% of your liquor licenses was the maximum number. That's what we were told. That's how that number was arrived at while we were designing that ordinance back in 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So that number was basically an arbitrary number from the CCC. So getting hung up on that number is not the best way to do this, in my opinion. If we had known at the time, who knows if we would have decided on 14 or 12 or 10. We can't really say. The problem is the CCC did keep moving the goalposts, and that's really who moved the goalposts. They continually were changing the rules, and in fact, still do to this day. And we were trying to do what the CCC has mandated, and most of this is mandated. We designed our things to match what they were doing. We ended up with 14 HCAs. You're not guaranteed by having an HCA. You're not guaranteed that you're going to have a license. However, to get back to what Councilor Rodriguez had to say, and I agree, this is a matter of fairness at this point. We didn't see it coming that we would have to say, wait a minute, what order are we taking these in? Nobody ever saw what this would be, how this would play out. And as far as Councilor Lally, with all due respect, if you want to get this done, then you should vote for this tonight, because this is going to drag on. If we don't move forward in this manner, this is going to drag on for 7 or 8 years. In my opinion, this will be in court for quite a long time. So in my opinion, it's time for us to look at this. It's not a perfect world. The businesses, they just should be treated. Take away the fact that it's marijuana, and some of us are a different generation, and it was a questionable thing that happened. The CCC has mandated that these should be treated like liquor licenses. We don't, again, I agree with Councilor Rodriguez. We don't decide, well, this liquor store does a better job than this one, and we should take this one's license away. The public will decide who's successful and who's not. And we've protected the neighborhoods by putting zoning criteria in on where they can be. I think it's time to move on. We need to get this done. We have made the city look bad. It is a matter of fairness at this point. And as far as what Councilor Cardoso is talking about, if there become future licenses available, I'd have no problem adding into the ordinance that they should be prioritized. And again, I want to make sure I understand the difference between SC and EE before we get into that, and try to get some guidance from the CCC. But the CCC has, when they were writing their regulations, we were coterminous at the time trying to write this ordinance. We did as much as we could, as well as we could at the time, but things have changed and they continue to change. In the interest of fairness and in the interest of getting these businesses off the ground, our job is not to worry about these businesses. And I know some of these business owners. Our job is not to worry about them. Our job is to worry about the taxpayers of Brockton and get these businesses active and not held up in court. I don't love the idea. I originally had said, let's go from 8 to 10. In this case, we have 14 HCAs. People, let's get this done. Let's vote on this. The amendment that we need to vote on is to get to the 14. It is a matter of fairness. It's a matter of taking care of our taxpayers and our constituents. And we've done the rest of the work. Let's move on with this and not let this become something that drags the city and this council down for the next 2 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Cruz. Now we are going on a second round, so I believe Councilor Azak, followed by Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to clarify a few things. Attorney Resnick, is there language that states, have we put a time limit of when these licenses need to be up and running? I remember the committee speaking about it, but I don't remember seeing anything, or I've tried to find it. Is there anything that states? It was mentioned also by Councilor Thompson a few minutes ago.
No, there is not. And I did inquire whether or not that language was in the host community agreement, and it's not spelled out either. What the expectation is that they have to use reasonable efforts to open their doors. The people that have the authority to bring a license holder in to show those reasonable efforts is the License Commission. They can establish a hearing, and from what I've heard from the law department, that's what the License Commission will do if any of the applicants just sit on a license, so to speak.
So wait, so they would go before the License Commission? Because that's where I'm a little confused.
Yes.
I thought we were the licensing body, which I did not support, but I thought they had to come back before us.
No, so you are the licensing authority. Once you grant your licenses, for the most part, the rest of the oversight is by the License Commissions, renewals, like the suspensions and things like that. The ordinance specifically spells out the instances in which a matter would become before the city council, but the majority of the instances are only with notice to the city council. So if the License Commission intends to bring someone before them for a suspension or review of their license, they do that and they notify the city council, we're going to be bringing this applicant, this license holder in. I think the only time that the city council would weigh in would be on a revocation hearing. But that's what the council did. They gave licensing authority to the city council, but oversight of the license to the License Commission.
Oh, okay. Well, I understood it differently, and that's what so I'm happy to hear that. Actually, in a few times this evening, it's been mentioned that, we don't owe these businesses anything, it's up to us to protect the residents. But I just want to remind my colleagues that this was supposed to bring funds into the city. These businesses that was the whole reason for the host community agreements, is that this would help us, bring money into the city. So we do want them to be successful. I don't want to set up a business to fail. So I think we need to consider that. And I have no problem in increasing the number as long as we're controlling it at the same time, so we don't find ourselves in the same situation. Thank you again, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. President. Limiting the number of licenses is not some kind of act to spite the free market. It's not anything that, we decided to do out of any ulterior motive. Like Councilor Azak said, it is we're not in this to, lose the city money. We want businesses that can be successful. And that means, sometimes we have to regulate. If this was an entirely free market based operation without the government being involved at all, we wouldn't be having this conversation because there would be no limit on licenses. We want to be more as a city. We want to be more than, our business community can't just be, Dollar Trees and pot shops and the occasional Dunkin' Donuts. We have to diversify. And I think that we're fine where we are. This is not anything more for me than an issue of whether or not we already have enough licenses, and an issue of who has the final say, the council or the mayor. The council set a license limit. Not necessarily Mayor Rodriguez. We set 8 licenses. Mayor Carpenter signed 10 host agreements. Mayor Rodriguez added to that, but that, I resent the councilor's apparent accusation that, I was pointing the finger in his direction. This is, who's in charge, the mayor or the council? Who sets the rules? Does the council tentatively set rules that the mayor decides to change and we scramble to catch up with? What happens? So, like I said, this is going and going. As it stands, I would not vote for this amendment. If it is the will of the council to pass this amendment, I will not let that get in the way of the passage of the total ordinance. But at this time, Mr. President, I would call the vote.
All right, the vote has been called. We are voting on the amendment as read by the city clerk. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
No.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
No.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
No.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Councilor
Sorry, I'm
McCaskill?
having mute button issues. I'm sorry. I voted yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
8 in the affirmative, 3 in opposition.
All right, the amendment is agreed to. The question is now on passage of this ordinance as amended to a third reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
No.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
That's 10 in the affirmative, 1 in opposition.
All right, councilors, it's passed to a third reading. Mr. Clerk, item number 22.
An ordinance amending Part 2 of the revised ordinances, Article 2, City Council, Division 3, Rules or Orders and Procedure. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton, Section 2-91, shall be amended by adding the following new section, F, Committee on Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, to consist of 5 councilors to consider matters pertaining to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the City of Brockton, and in general to support city departments that deal with such issues. In council, January 11, 2021, read and refer to the Standing Committee on Ordinance. That report was favorable.
Question is on passing this to a third reading by a roll call vote. Councilor Cardozo?
This, with all due respect to this council, this number 22 is almost laughable, and I don't even know why we introduced this. We have a diversity commission that's made up of citizens of this city, and that's what a diversity commission for us in this city of Brockton should look like, not members of this council that has shown that they have no clue oftentimes what diversity and inclusion means and what equity means. So I don't even know why this is on the agenda. I would ask the councilors to just table this or vote no on this. Our mayor needs to reappoint, and I know we go back and forth with this, if that diversity commission exists and they should just call a meeting, but there are expired terms, and he did appoint someone, Mr. Wells, last year to that commission. So I think he understands that folks need to be reappointed. And we have a community justice task force that I've asked to, that task force is collecting information in the community around equity. They could report to the diversity commission. If the folks on that commission no longer want to serve, we find other folks to serve. But a diversity commission in this city where we have a council that's not really represented, doesn't really represent the constituents. We're in a majority Black and brown city, and we have a council that has 2, maybe 3 folks of color. And the way our voting record, the way that we have voted, shows that we know nothing about equity. And now we want to have, who would sit on this board? I know I won't. And I would urge Councilor Rodriguez, who has voted with me in the most recent city council meetings, not to sit on this committee. So who's going to sit on this committee? 5 white councilors deciding what is fair and unfair to this community. So I would ask the councilors to table this. This is nonsense, and I'll be voting no on this tonight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Yes, Counselor.
Counselor Neary here. And I've been listening to Counselor Cardozo as she's been explaining why we should and should not have this ordinance. And in some regards, I have some of the same concerns, but I am going to point out one thing. I am a counselor who understands equity, diversity, and inclusion. I've served this city for almost 40 years. I don't at any time think of what color code or creed I'm representing. I represent the people. I've done it. I've done it to the best of my ability for a long time, and I'm tired of listening to these particular comments, Counselor, that come out of your mouth at every meeting. We are a city council, and we're to work together as a council.
Well,
But
maybe it's time you retire, Counselor Neary, if you're tired.
Counselor
Counselor
Neary has the floor.
exactly right. But come on, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Let's work together. We got a tough year ahead of us. Let's work together. If not, then maybe you shouldn't run for re-election. Thank you, Mr. President.
If you were interested in working together, you would have voted with us when it came to equity. You have no clue what equity and inclusion is. You're out of touch and it's time to go. Thank
Mr.
you.
President,
Yes, Counselor Cruz.
please take control of the meeting.
I agree. The question is on passage to a third reading. The clerk will call the roll.
Isaac,
I had my hand up, so I would just like to comment. I can't support this this evening, and the reason for that is because we already have a diversity commission, and that's the reason I can't vote for this. So I just wanted to clarify that. So my vote is no.
Cardozo,
Absolutely not.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Absolutely not.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Under the same grounds as Counselor Azak, no.
Mendez,
No.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
I actually had my hand up because I wanted to say something beforehand, but I didn't get that opportunity. And Mr. Chairman, I hope that you give me 1 second to say what I wanted to say here before I vote.
Go ahead, Counselor Rodriguez.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I actually believe that this whole thing was not explained properly. I do believe that the city, from a legislative branch in the city, needs to take diversity inclusion seriously. And I believe that the city council, just like we have an ordinance committee, just like we have a committee on real estate, just like we have a committee on, you name it in the city, that the city should have an official committee that's in the books that basically handles the issues of diversity, inclusion, because I believe that the committee that we have, the diversity committee that we have, that's made up of citizens, can look at those issues. But as far as the law is concerned, I think the law in the city is designed by the city council, is made by the city council. So I think you can actually have the two groups working side by side in ensuring that we actually have a real committee in the books. Because you look at cities bigger than Brockton, smaller than Brockton, they have a ton of committees that look at a variety of issues. And especially going back to what Councilor Cardozo said, in terms of the lack of diversity that we have had in this body, I think it's super important that we have a committee of the council that looks at the issues of diversity. So I feel what she's feeling, but I also think it's that important that we bring to light the issues of diversity and inclusion to the level of the city council, because we leave it all to the administration to set up these committees with friends and families that aren't really doing what they should be doing. But the voters actually elected city councilors, and city councilors should answer to the voters. And that's why I actually would support this with some input to make sure that we have in the books officially a committee of the city council that looks at these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Could we proceed with the vote then?
Rodriguez,
That would be yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
That's 6 in the affirmative, 5 in opposition.
It's passed to a third reading. Mr. Clerk, item number 23.
An ordinance amending Article 3, Section 2-186 of the revised ordinances of the City of Ordinances for the City of Brockton. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows. Section 2-186 of Chapter 2 is hereby amended relative to Assistant City Solicitor. In Council, January 27, 2020, read and refer to the Standing Committee on Ordinance. That report was favorable.
Question is on passage to a third reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Sorry, didn't I? Okay. Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri, Ianieri, Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Ianieri. That's 10 in the affirmative.
Passed to a third reading. Item number 24.
An ordinance amending Appendix C zoning, Article 7, Board of Appeals, Section 27-50 of the zoning ordinances of the City of Brockton to increase the fee associated with buildable lots determinations from $50 to $250. In Council, December 28, 2020. Read and refer to the Standing Committee on Ordinance and Planning. Those reports were favorable.
The question is on adoption, strike that. The question is on passage to a third reading by a roll call vote. Would the clerk call the roll?
Azak,
I had my hand up, so I did want to make a statement on this
I'm
item.
sorry, Counselor. Go ahead.
No problem. I was contacted, the reason I can't support this evening is I was contacted by a number of constituents, contractors who had an issue with this increase. They felt that it was a huge increase. So at this time, I can't support this. So my vote is no.
Cardozo,
No.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
No.
Lally,
No. Can you hear me?
Mendez,
No.
Monahan,
No.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
That's 6 in opposition, 5 in favor.
The motion fails. Item number 25.
Appointment of Harry Soames of 5 Kenneth Avenue, Brockton, to the Council on Aging Board of Directors as an alternate for a 3-year term ending January 2024, and City Council January 25th, 2021. Ready and refer to Standing Committee on Finance. That report was favorable.
Question is on confirmation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
The appointment is confirmed. Item number 26.
Order of acceptance and expenditures of the total grant award in the amount of $14,000 for the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency Fiscal 20 Emergency Management Preparedness Grant to Brockton Emergency Management Agency's Fiscal 20 Emergency Management Preparedness Grant Fund. In council, January 25th, 2021. Read and referred to the Standing Committee on Finance. That report was favorable.
The question is on adoption by a roll call vote. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
The order is adopted. Item number 28. Strike that, 27.
Order total grant award in the amount of $623,809 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, 2021, Senator Charles E. Shannon Jr. Community Safety Initiative Grant to the City of Brockton Police Department, fiscal 2021, Senator Charles E. Shannon Jr. Community Safety Initiative Grant Fund. In council, January 25th, 2021. Read and referred to the Standing Committee on Finance. That report was favorable.
Question is on adoption by a roll call vote. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
The order is adopted. Item number 28.
Resolved that Ms. Janice Fitzgerald and a representative from the Massachusetts Healthy Aging Collaborative be invited to a committee of the council to inform the public and councilors about the selection of Brockton to receive this honor. In council, January 25th, 2021. Read and referred to the Standing Committee on Finance. That report was favorable.
The question comes on adoption by a roll call vote. Will the clerk call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
The order is adopted. Item number 29.
Ordered that the City Council authorize the Superintendent, Michael B. Thomas, to put out an RFP for a 5-year contract for the school department warehouse and storage facilities for the Brockton Public Schools.
Referred to the Committee on Finance. Number 30.
Ordered that the City of Brockton hereby accepts a recoverable grant in the amount of $250,000 through Mass Development's Brownfield Redevelopment Fund to perform environmental remediation activities at the city-owned Cochran Building, 308 Montello Street, to advance the redevelopment of this site.
Referred to the Finance Committee. Number 31.
Acceptance of expenditures of the total grant award in the amount of $2,654,000 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Mass Works Program through City of Brockton Planning Department Mass Works Program Grant Fund.
Refer to the Committee on Finance. Number 32.
Acceptance and expenditures of the total grant award in the amount of $275,000 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, fiscal 2021, Municipal Police Services Staffing Grant to the Brockton Police Department, fiscal 2021, Municipal Police Services Staffing Grant Fund.
Refer to the Committee on Finance. And the next, Mr. Clerk.
Resolved to discuss reviving cultural affairs and tourism in the city of Brockton. Be it resolved that Bill Hogan, president of the Downtown History Museum of Brockton, be invited to the next Finance Committee meeting to discuss plans to help revive the cultural affairs and tourism group in the city of Brockton in the year of 2021.
Refer to the Committee on Finance. Number 34.
Resolved to invite Ms. Michelle St. James, J.D. grant writer for the Brockton Police Department to appear before the Standing Committee on Public Safety to discuss the various grants and other funding obtained to address city issues, including without limitation, crime prevention, youth services, gang violence, and traffic safety, and in particular to forecast the funding that will be available for such programs and endeavors in fiscal 22.
Refer to the Committee on Finance. Mr. Clerk, I don't believe we have any late files, am I correct?
I have none on record.
All right, Councilor recognition, Councilor Nacastro.
Sorry, I apologize. Mr. President.
I gave him the wrong thing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Clerk.
if I may, on 78, on number 34, I'm looking at our program here, and I believe that it was referred to finance. However, it would appear that it probably should go to the public safety.
That's right.
You are correct, Mr. Clerk. My notation was incorrect. That will be referred to the Public Safety Committee.
I'm sorry, that's an error on our part.
Mr. President, if I can ask a question, please.
Yes, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I logged in initially, and then for some reason I was kicked out of the meeting and was not able to rejoin until the discussion, until agenda item number 19. So could I ask what came of agenda item number 6, the hearing for the transfer of the motor vehicle repair license? Because I was in contact with Attorney Creedon, who was also unable to join the meeting. I believe he is on the call now. I was hoping we could, if that matter was postponed or some other, whatever came of it, I was hoping that maybe we could address it tonight, since now all parties are available and ready to move forward.
Councilor Thompson, we should. I have been watching the chat room and I did not see his name turn up. I did see a telephone number, not knowing who that was. And if that is Attorney Creedon, then we should revert back to the hearing on the transfer of the licenses. Attorney Creedon, are you on?
Attorney Creedon,
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Attorney Jake Creedon here. With me is Jose Montero. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Attorney Creedon. I'm sure you've briefed your client on this hearing.
Yes, historically, I can make it clear and concise, I hope, Mr. President. Presently here, both the councilor from Ward 5 and the Deputy Chief Williams and I have been working on this location for a motor vehicle repair license. And I can tell you that there are some 21 stipulations or conditions that my clients have signed on with their signature. And I've gone over each and every one of them, all 21, and the city ordinances as is requested in one of those conditions as to the meaning of the motor vehicle repair license and all of the requirements of that ordinance. And so, again, the location is 65 Court Street. I believe the initial inspections have been made and they were satisfied. My clients have lived in Brockton for over 20 years, the husband and wife. Jose is the president and everything in the corporation, which is the applicant itself. And I'd respectfully answer any questions. They are here, but I can tell you they've been in the business. There's no criminal record of Mr. Mondero of any kind. And again, he's been a citizen in Brockton for over 20 years. And I think a very suitable person for this business.
Councilor Thompson, I know you sent out something earlier today, which was very helpful and very complete and concise. Any comments you'd like to offer?
Just that last week I did meet with Deputy Fire Chief Ed Williams. I met him at the locale at 65 Court Street, and we discussed this application and some of his concerns regarding this locale. It is a small shop. There's limited parking on the premises, but the stipulations that I did send everybody, in which Attorney Creedon did speak about. I spoke to Attorney Creedon about these conditions. I'm satisfied with them. I know Deputy Fire Chief Ed Williams is satisfied with them. And so I'd like to forego any reading of the 21 stipulations. If I could move to make that a part of the record. And I'd also move forward to approve the transfer of this license.
Clerk, do you have a copy of those 21 stipulations?
I do.
Is there any
I'd like to second that motion.
Any objection from the council if those stipulations are incorporated into this hearing and application? The chair hears none. Anyone else in favor of this transfer? Anyone else in favor? Anyone here opposed? Is there anyone opposed to this transfer? The question now comes on granting. If there's no further debate or discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri. Ianieri. Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ianieri. 10 in the affirmative, 0 in opposition.
The petition is approved.
Council President, a vote should be taken now with the stipulations.
All right. Is there a motion to approve with the stipulations incorporated?
Mr. President, I make so motion.
Second.
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 All right. Motion made and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri. Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative, 0 in opposition.
Petition is granted.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you, the members of the council. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Attorney Creedon.
Not a problem, Mr. President. Thank you.
We now turn to council recognition, and I know Councilor Nicastro and then Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, a 4th grade teacher at the Raymond School named Betsy Doyle listened to her children as she was teaching on Zoom And when one of the students said, "I smell smoke," she told the child to get everyone out of the house and called 911. I'm so proud of her. I know Betsy Doyle personally. She and some of her friends from the class of 1997 at Stonehill College were among the many babysitters who helped keep me sane when my children were little. She is a wonderful teacher. She's teaching now over 20 years in the school district. I want to applaud her quick thinking. She potentially saved lives with what she did, listening to her students and having the students listen to her. And so I'm going to be issuing a citation to her. And I just want to bring her fine efforts to everyone's attention because she's terrific. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. My concern is that we have now have been doing these Zoom meetings now for over 3 months, starting way back last year and moving into this year. And my concern is that I don't know exactly how the rest of you guys feel about this, but it's gotten to a point where enough is enough. And I think it's time for the council to go back to the council chambers, for us to hold our meetings in there. City Hall is open on a part-time basis. We are part-time counselors, and I think it's time for us to go back, because these Zoom calls with waiting for this person to answer, the mute is somebody is muted, somebody's not muted, somebody's on, somebody's not on, is driving me completely bonkers to a point that I think it's time for us to seriously consider going back to the chambers and hold our meetings with the spacings that we have in place, with the regulations that exist in place. But I don't see it, us being in that chamber for an hour or two once a week at being a great deal of problem. And that's what I leave it up to you, Mr. President, to basically seek out an answer to this particular thing, to see when can we go back to this council, because this Zoom thing isn't really working out. I don't know how the rest of you guys feel about this, but it's not working out, and it's giving some of us a headache to a point where we're spending the day doing Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, and then we ended up spending 2 or 3 hours sitting here kind of going through this whole thing. It's just it's driving some of us bonkers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Counselor, the chair agrees with you. This is going to be discussed hopefully later this week. There are a couple of logistical implications in that Mr. Plouffe now has his staff working during the day. Apparently there's no night custodian. We would also have to have security come back to allow certainly counselors in, even if the public were still watching us remotely. But I do agree that hopefully within the next meeting or two, we will have an answer and we'll be back in council chamber. So I want you to know that's in progress.
Thank you.
Anyone else seeking recognition? Councilor Mendez.
Yes, I just want to remind everyone that Accounts Committee will be meeting next Tuesday, February 16 at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mendez. Councilor Azak.
Thank you. I just want his attention that BCA has a new channel on cable. It's channel 1072. So it's a new channel to watch. It's supposed to be a HD. So we're looking forward to that. And there's a lot of good things happening in the city of Brockton. I know a lot of people who follow social media or have seen some of the buzz around the city with the filming of Don't Look Up with some real Hollywood stars here in our downtown. So if you haven't had a chance to hear about it or see it, check out Mark Vasconcelos's, the photographer from the Enterprise, his pictures. He's gotten some really up close pictures with some big Hollywood stars here in the city. So it's nice to have that little buzz around the city. Exciting times. With that being said, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really, this is just, I just wanted to say, I agree with Councilor Rodriguez. We've had more than enough Zoom. And, I have full faith in you as the president to keep that, to transition us into live meetings again. And to Councilor Rodriguez, if there's any trouble, if we need to put an additional, have an additional statement from the council, I would happily co-sponsor a resolve to sort of make official the will of the council, not to correct the president, but to make that statement to the folks in City Hall that we would like to return to the chambers. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. Councilor Azak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to answer some of the concerns and what you just mentioned about the meetings and having, the building department have somebody in there overtime. When we did hold meetings there, when I was council president, that was all covered with COVID CARES Act funding. So there is funding to cover that, and the police details that we had, that I had, and some of the building department, some of the when we had a custodian in there wiping everything down, that's all covered by CARES Act funding. So just so you know that it doesn't necessarily come out of the budget directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Has everyone spoken? Okay, I want to call a timeout, counselors. It's very important to me that everyone understands and respects the work that we do. We don't always have to agree. And I've said in the past, I think it's good that we don't all agree. However, I will tell you that I think it's very important as adults that we accept opposing viewpoints and opposing votes and not ascribe to those opposing viewpoints or votes some type of bias or some type of prejudice or some type of inability to understand a person or a group or an issue. I don't think any of you are like that. I think you do your due diligence, as now the mayor and Councilor Sullivan used to say. However, earlier this evening, Councilor Cruz made a good point. He said, Mr. President, take charge of the meeting. And I am not going to allow sniping, and I'm not going to allow backbiting in public comments. And if that occurs, I have no problem turning off someone's microphone. And if it occurs in council chamber, I have no problem ruling someone out of order. And if they disrupt the meeting, I have no problem having someone escorted from the chamber. We are going to function as a legitimate, adult, thoughtful city council. And I hope that you will take what I'm saying sincerely, because it's offered that way. I want people to respect the council, and they're not going to do that when we have some of the cross comments that are going on. I don't care how you vote on an issue. I don't care if you criticize any position I take, my thought process, but don't personalize it. And don't personalize it towards your fellow councilors. I don't think that's professional, and I'm sure that the public, everyone in the public, from whatever community, from whatever culture, from whatever race, they expect us to be courteous to each other, and they expect us to respect opposing viewpoints. And again, I offer these comments sincerely. I respect all of you. I enjoy serving with all of you, but we are going to have decorum, professionalism, and if the chair has to take actions, which I would hope would never be required, I'm no shrinking violet, folks. Please be assured I will do what I have to do to make sure that we have that decorum and we run meetings the way the public expects us to. So if there is no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.